Welcome to the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner Prepcast, where we guide you through everything you need to know for your certification exam. Whether you're just starting or looking to refine your knowledge, this course will set you up for success. Brought to you by baremetalcyber.com. Let's get started. When people think about Amazon S3 or simple storage service, they often picture a limitless bucket where files can be placed and retrieved with ease. But while S3 makes storage simple, securing that storage requires careful thought. Every bucket and every object within a bucket can be protected by multiple overlapping controls. The importance of these controls cannot be overstated. A single misstep, such as leaving a bucket public when it should be private, has led to some of the largest data breaches in recent memory. Beginners should see S3 security as the art of ensuring data is accessible to the right people while remaining off-limits to everyone else. AWS provides many tools for this purpose, and learning how they fit together is central to mastering cloud security. A common area of confusion for newcomers is the difference between S3 bucket policies and IAM policies. Both determine access, but they function from different perspectives. An IAM policy is attached to a user, group, or role and defines what that identity can do across AWS, including actions on S3. A bucket policy, by contrast, is attached to the bucket itself and controls who may interact with it. Imagine a nightclub with both guest lists and bouncers. The guest list is like the IAM policy defining who is invited, while the bouncer is the bucket policy enforcing rules at the door. Together, they form a complete access model, but it is important to know where each applies. To help prevent accidental exposure, AWS introduced block public access settings, available at both the account and bucket levels. These settings act as a master switch to prevent buckets or objects from being shared publicly, regardless of any other policy. By default, block public access is enabled for new accounts, closing off one of the most common sources of data leaks. Beginners should think of this as a child-proof lock. Even if someone tries to make a bucket public, block public access overrides them and keeps the door closed. It is one of the simplest yet most effective safety features in S3. Before bucket policies matured, AWS relied heavily on access control lists, or ACLs, to manage permissions. ACLs allow individual permissions to be set on objects or buckets, but they are considered a legacy approach. They lack the flexibility and clarity of modern policies, and in many environments they are disabled entirely. Today, ACLs are mostly used for very specific compatibility cases. For beginners, it is enough to understand that while ACLs still exist, AWS recommends moving to bucket policies and IAM policies instead. It is like learning that old locks still exist on some doors, but newer, more secure mechanisms are now the standard. Ownership is another dimension of S3 security. By default, objects uploaded by a different AWS account remain owned by that uploader, even if they are placed in your bucket. This can complicate permissions, as the bucket owner may not have full control. To solve this, AWS introduced the S3 object ownership setting, which allows bucket owners to enforce ownership of all objects, regardless of uploader. This ensures consistency and avoids conflicts. Beginners should picture this like a landlord owning everything inside the building, no matter who brings in the furniture. It centralizes control and eliminates messy disputes over who really owns the data. Access points further refine S3 security by providing unique entry doors into a bucket. Each access point can have its own policy, restricting use to a particular team, application, or even network. Access points also support restricting traffic to a virtual private cloud, or VPC, ensuring that only resources within your private network can reach the bucket. This makes access patterns simpler and safer. Beginners should see access points as a way of slicing a bucket into controlled zones, much like different doors to the same building that only certain people can use. It adds flexibility without sacrificing oversight. VPC endpoints provide another layer of security by keeping traffic to S3 within the private AWS network. A VPC endpoint acts as a private gateway, preventing data from flowing over the public internet. There are two main types: gateway endpoints, which are simpler and typically used for S3, and interface endpoints, which provide more granular control. For highly regulated industries, this capability is essential. Beginners should imagine sending valuables through a private underground tunnel rather than shipping them across busy public roads. The result is the same, but the risk of interception is dramatically reduced. Encryption in S3 can be enforced by default at the bucket level. This means that any object placed into the bucket is automatically encrypted, whether or not the uploader requested it. This default setting helps organizations ensure compliance and reduces the chance of human error. For learners, think of it as a rule that every package delivered to a warehouse must be wrapped and sealed, no matter what. Even if someone forgets, the system guarantees the protection is applied. It is one more way AWS makes strong security the path of least resistance. Sometimes temporary access to objects is necessary. Pre-signed URLs allow this by generating a time-limited link that grants specific permissions, such as downloading or uploading a file. For instance, a user might need to download a large dataset once, but you do not want to open the bucket more broadly. A pre-signed URL solves this problem by acting like a temporary key that expires after a set period. Beginners should see this as lending someone a spare key that self-destructs after one use, ensuring convenience without permanent risk. Policies in S3 can also be very precise, thanks to condition keys. These allow rules that depend on context, such as requiring the request to come from a particular AWS organization, or limiting access based on encryption methods used. For example, using the condition key AWS principal org ID, you can restrict access to identities only within your corporate organization. This makes policies more than just allow or deny statements. They become context-aware and adaptable. Beginners should imagine this as a door lock that not only checks your badge, but also ensures you are entering during approved hours and from the right building. Monitoring is equally important in S3. Server access logging provides detailed records of every request made to a bucket, showing who accessed it and how. CloudTrail data events add another layer, recording object-level operations like uploads and downloads. Together, these logs allow teams to reconstruct what happened if something goes wrong. For beginners, logs are like surveillance cameras. You may not watch them constantly, but when something suspicious happens, you can rewind and review the footage. Without logs, investigations become guesswork. S3 versioning is another feature that helps protect data. When enabled, every update to an object creates a new version rather than overwriting the old one. This means accidental deletions or overwrites can be rolled back by restoring a previous version. It acts like a safety net for critical files, ensuring that mistakes are reversible. Beginners should think of this as a time machine for objects, allowing you to undo errors and recover quickly. In security terms, versioning is an essential resilience tool against both accidents and malicious actions. Lifecycle rules allow you to define how objects transition over time, such as moving older files into cheaper storage tiers or eventually deleting them. While often discussed in the context of cost optimization, lifecycle rules also contribute to security by ensuring data is not retained longer than necessary. Sensitive information should not sit forgotten in a bucket for years. Beginners should see lifecycle policies as automated cleanup schedules, reducing clutter and risk. They make sure that only necessary data remains accessible, lowering the chances of forgotten but still exposed information. Replication provides resilience by copying objects across buckets, possibly in different regions. Along with redundancy, replication respects ownership and encryption settings. This means you can replicate data for disaster recovery while ensuring that security controls remain intact. Beginners should imagine creating a backup branch office that follows the same rules as headquarters. Even if the primary site fails, the replicated data remains secure and under the same governance. Replication ties together resilience and security, ensuring data is both available and protected. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Despite the many controls available, some of the most common security incidents in Amazon S3 come from simple misconfigurations. Accidentally leaving a bucket public or assigning overly permissive policies can expose millions of records to the internet. These mistakes have made headlines when companies unintentionally leaked sensitive information. For beginners, it's important to recognize that the danger is not usually the technology itself, but how it is set up. AWS provides strong guardrails, but customers must use them wisely. Learning these patterns early helps prevent repeating the same costly errors that others have made. To gain visibility into storage usage and security across an entire organization, AWS offers S3 Storage Lens. This feature aggregates metrics and insights at scale, showing not just how much data is stored, but also where risks may exist. For example, Storage Lens can highlight buckets without encryption enabled or show trends in public access. Beginners can think of it as a dashboard that looks across every garage in a city to report on which doors are locked and which are standing open. It shifts the perspective from individual buckets to a global view. Another tool that improves oversight is IAM Access Analyzer, which can examine S3 bucket policies to determine whether they allow unintended public or cross-account access. Instead of relying on humans to parse complex JSON policies, Access Analyzer provides plain language findings. For example, it might flag a bucket policy that accidentally permits everyone on the internet to read its contents. Beginners should see this as an automated policy reviewer, catching mistakes before they cause harm. It acts like a legal expert reviewing contracts, ensuring the fine print matches the intended rules. When it comes to protecting sensitive data stored in S3, Amazon Macie plays a unique role. Macie uses machine learning to automatically discover and classify information such as personally identifiable information, financial records, or health data. By scanning buckets, it alerts teams to the presence of data that requires extra protection. Beginners should think of Macie as a metal detector in an airport. It doesn't stop all threats, but it highlights areas needing closer inspection. By combining Macie with S3 security controls, organizations can reduce the risk of unknowingly exposing critical information. S3 Object Lock is another powerful feature, especially in compliance-heavy industries. It allows you to enforce write once, read many protections, meaning that once data is written, it cannot be modified or deleted until a set retention period expires. Legal hold options can also freeze data regardless of retention policies. This ensures evidence, logs, or regulated records remain intact even if someone tries to tamper with them. Beginners should picture this as sealing documents in a glass case. You can read them, but you cannot alter them until the rules allow. To further protect against accidental or malicious deletions, AWS provides multi-factor authentication delete, or MFA delete. With this feature enabled, critical operations like permanently deleting versioned objects require not only permissions but also a time-based authentication code. This adds a human checkpoint before irreversible actions occur. For learners, it's like needing both a key and a fingerprint to open a vault. It ensures that no single misstep or compromised credential can erase valuable data without extra validation. Cross-account access is sometimes necessary, but it introduces additional complexity. A common mistake is granting broad access to another account without realizing the implications. Properly configuring bucket policies, roles, and conditions is essential to avoid unintended exposure. For instance, you may want a partner company to read certain objects but not upload new ones. Beginners should see cross-account access as similar to giving a house key to a neighbor. It can be convenient, but you must be precise about which doors they can open and under what circumstances. When distributing content globally, many organizations pair S3 with Amazon CloudFront. In these setups, Origin Access Control, or OAC, ensures that only CloudFront can access the S3 bucket, while the public interacts only with CloudFront. This prevents direct access to S3 and allows CloudFront features such as caching and TLS enforcement to provide additional security. Beginners should imagine this as requiring all guests to enter a building through the main lobby rather than sneaking in through side doors. OAC ensures that security checks are centralized and consistent. S3 also supports static website hosting, but this requires special attention. When a bucket is configured to serve as a website, it is often made public by necessity. Misconfigurations here can lead to unexpected exposure, especially if sensitive files are stored alongside website content. Beginners should treat static hosting as a separate use case with distinct risks. If done carefully, it can be safe, but it should never be confused with secure private storage. The key is clear separation and intentional design rather than casual reuse of buckets. Event notifications allow S3 to trigger actions when changes occur, such as sending a message when a file is uploaded. While useful, these should be configured with least privilege in mind. For instance, if events trigger a Lambda function, that function should only have the permissions necessary for its task. Overly broad permissions increase the risk of misuse. Beginners should view event notifications as helpful assistance. They should be given just enough authority to do their job, but not more. This keeps automation safe while still productive. Another aspect of S3 governance is controlling who pays for access. With the requester pays feature, the person downloading data pays the transfer costs rather than the bucket owner. This is useful for large data sets shared with external users. However, it must be configured carefully as it changes assumptions about billing. For learners, it's like deciding who pays for postage when mailing a package, sender or receiver. The choice affects not only costs, but also access patterns, and should be made intentionally. For compliance and audit purposes, S3 plays a central role. Many organizations store logs, evidence, and regulated data in S3 because of its durability and integration with encryption, versioning, and object lock. Auditors often want to see proof that sensitive data is both protected and retained correctly. By combining S3 features like access logs, lifecycle policies, and encryption, teams can generate strong evidence. Beginners should see this as S3 doubling as both a storage system and a compliance vault, capable of satisfying technical and regulatory demands. From an exam perspective, learners should remember the key takeaways about S3 security. IAM and bucket policies work together but differ in scope. Block public access prevents accidents, and ACLs are legacy features best avoided. Object ownership, access points, and VPC endpoints provide finer-grained controls, while encryption and pre-signed URLs balance protection with flexibility. Advanced features like object lock, MFA delete, and integration with CloudFront or Macie reinforce security. Recognizing common misconfigurations is as important as knowing the features themselves, because many breaches stem from misunderstanding rather than missing tools. In conclusion, securing S3 requires combining preventative guardrails, clear ownership, and active monitoring. AWS provides layers of controls, from policies and block settings to logging, versioning, and object lock. Used together, these features ensure data remains private, durable, and compliant. For learners, the lesson is clear. S3 is simple to use but complex to secure, and careful configuration makes all the difference. Treat each bucket as a potential vault, and apply every appropriate safeguard to ensure that vault remains closed to outsiders while serving the needs of those inside. That concludes today's episode of the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner Prepcast. Be sure to tune in for the next episode and visit us online at baremetalcyber.com or cyberauthor.me for more resources, including news, mailing lists, YouTube videos, podcasts, and much more.